Hello, I'm Anna Foster, live from the Qatari capital, Doha. For the next 30 minutes, we're bringing you a special programme looking at the key developments from the first 7 days of the US-Israel-Iran conflict, which has dragged in countries across the Middle East and beyond. We'll be live with our correspondents across the region and around the world. And we'll have analysis from our specialists in our London newsroom.
Something happened in the last 24 hours that changed the entire direction of this war. And almost nobody is connecting the dots. Iran's president went on international television and publicly apologized to the Gulf states, Kuwait, Qatar, the UAE, for the missile and drone strikes that had been hitting their cities for 9 straight days. He said Iran had no intention of attacking neighboring countries. He said Iran respected their sovereignty. He said the strikes were directed at American military assets only. And then, 6 hours later, while his apology was still being broadcast on news channels across the region, Iranian drones slammed into a high-rise building in Kuwait City and set it ablaze. Iranian drones struck the fuel tanks at Kuwait International Airport. Sirens wailed across the entire city. Kuwaiti air defenses scrambled. Civilians ran for cover in the streets below a building that was now a tower of fire against the night sky. Iran's president apologized for bombing Kuwait, and then Iran bombed Kuwait again. But that is not the line I'm talking about. That is not what brought me here tonight with everything I'm about to tell you. Because what happened in Kuwait, as shocking as it is actually a symptom of something far more dangerous that is now openly on the table. Something that 10 days ago, every military analyst in the world said would never actually happen. Something that crossed a threshold that no country in this conflict has come back from once they've crossed it. Iran has officially threatened to strike Israel's Dimona nuclear reactor. Not hinted, not implied. A senior Iranian military official stated it publicly, on record, reported by Iran's own semi-official state news agency, ISNA. The quote is precise. He said, and I'm going to read this to you word for word, "If Washington and Tel Aviv pursue a regime change scenario in practice, Tehran's final effective missiles will target the Dimona nuclear reactor and all regional energy infrastructure." And then he added 5 words that should make every person watching this video stop what they are doing and pay very close attention. He said, "This is a scenario we have already prepared for." Already prepared for. Not we are considering it. Not we are evaluating options. Already prepared for. Present tense. Past preparation. The plan exists. The missiles are designated. The coordinates are loaded. The only thing standing between this threat and its execution is the decision of a government that is currently under the most intense military bombardment of any nation since World War II. Fighting for its survival, with its supreme leader dead, its air force gone, its navy destroyed, and its hardline military commanders in the IRGC, not its diplomats, not its president, running the war. And this is where the story gets genuinely terrifying. Because there is a split happening inside Iran right now between the men who want to negotiate and the men who want to escalate. And the men who want to escalate are the ones with the missiles. I'm going to spend the next 2 hours walking you through everything that has happened, everything that is happening right now, and most importantly, the specific sequence of events that leads from where we are today to a nuclear strike on a nuclear facility. Because this is not a hypothetical anymore. Iran put it on the table officially. And I'm going to show you exactly why the people who study this for a living are treating it as the most serious nuclear threat in the Middle East since the Cuban Missile Crisis. Let's start at the beginning. Because to understand why Iran just crossed this line, you need to understand what was done to them. February 28, 2026, started like most Saturdays in Tehran. The markets were open. The streets were busy. People were going about their lives the way people do in a city of 9 million, even in a country under pressure, even in a country that had been watching its diplomatic options narrow for months. And then, at 1:15 in the morning Eastern Time, 9:45 in the morning Tehran time, the sky changed. The United States military and the Israeli Defense Forces launched a coordinated military operation that had been in planning for years and executed in a way the world had never seen before. The operation was called Operation Roaring Lion by Israel. The United States called it Operation Epic Fury. And both names are accurate descriptions of what happened in the hours that followed. Using an artificial intelligence targeting system that processed Iranian military infrastructure in real time, the United States struck more than 900 targets inside Iran in the first 12 hours. Not over a week, not over a campaign that built gradually. 12 hours, 900 targets, simultaneously. Iran's entire Air Force, Iran's entire Navy, Iran's air defense systems across 26 of the country's 31 provinces, command and control facilities, IRGC headquarters, ballistic missile launchers and manufacturing sites. Iran's National Broadcasting Agency bombed multiple times in the first day to prevent the regime from communicating with its population. Government and leadership facilities, including the Presidential Office, the Expediency Council, the Assembly of Experts, all of it struck in the opening hours. The speed of this operation was unlike anything in the history of modern warfare. Human military chains of command cannot process and execute 900 strike packages in 12 hours. The artificial intelligence targeting system that the U.S. deployed had been fed Iranian military infrastructure data for years. And when the order came, it executed at a speed that no human adversary can defend against. By the time Iranian commanders could even assess what was happening, their country's military architecture was already being dismantled around them in real time. And then, in those same first 12 hours, the United States struck the compound of Iran's supreme leader, Ayatollah Ali Khamenei, the man who had led the Islamic Republic since 1989, the man who had shaped Iranian foreign policy for nearly 4 decades, the man whose ideology, his concept of velayat-e-faqih, or guardianship of the jurist, was the entire constitutional foundation of the Iranian state, who had survived 4 American presidencies, survived multiple assassination attempts, survived decades of the most severe economic sanctions any country had ever faced, and had repeatedly, publicly vowed that the Islamic Republic of Iran would outlast all of its enemies. He did not outlast this one. Khamenei was killed on February 28, 2026, in the opening hours of Operation Epic Fury. The man whose portrait hangs in every government building in Iran, the man whose face appears on currency, on murals, on billboards across the country, dead in the first 12 hours, before most of the world had even woken up to understand what had started overnight. Now, the conventional military doctrine, the doctrine that the planners of this operation were banking on, said that this combination of factors would produce a rapid collapse. Destroy the military, kill the leader, eliminate the command structure, the regime fractures, the IRGC splinters, internal forces that have been suppressed for decades rise up. The government falls or sues for peace. Operation over in days. That did not happen. What happened instead fundamentally changed the strategic calculation of this war. And understanding why it didn't happen tells you everything about why Iran just crossed the line it crossed. The IRGC, the Islamic Revolutionary Guard Corps, is not just Iran's military. It is an ideological institution. It is a parallel state within the state. It has its own intelligence services, its own economy, its own chain of command that does not run through the elected government of Iran. When Khamenei died, the IRGC did not fracture. The hardline commanders within the IRGC consolidated. They took operational control of Iran's war strategy, and they did exactly what every intelligence assessment of the IRGC said they would do when pushed to an existential threat. They escalated. Iran named its retaliatory campaign Operation True Promise 4. It was a name chosen deliberately, a reference to the 3 previous operations Iran had launched against Israel in 2024 and 2025, each one escalating beyond the last. The name itself was a message. This is not new. This is a continuation. And we have been preparing for this moment longer than you have. In the first wave of Operation True Promise 4, Iran launched a barrage of ballistic missiles and drones that swept across the Gulf region with a scope that caught even prepared defenses off guard. And then Iran launched a second wave, and a third, and a fourth. Wave after wave, methodically, around the clock, in a cadence that was clearly designed to exhaust interceptor stocks, to stress air defense systems, to make Gulf states feel that no matter how many missiles they shot down, there would always be another wave coming. By day 9 of this war, today, as you watch this video, Iran has launched wave after wave of retaliatory strikes against American military bases and American allies across the entire Middle East. Against Al Udeid Air Base in Qatar, America's largest military base in the region, the forward headquarters of U.S. Central Command, the base from which the bombing campaign against Iran itself is being coordinated. Against Al Dhafra Air Base in the UAE, home to American F-35 and F-22 fighter jets. Against Ali Al Salem Air Base in Kuwait. Against Sheikh Issa Air Base in Bahrain, where Iran claimed to have destroyed the American Air Command and Control Center, aircraft fuel storage tanks, and military infrastructure. Against U.S. bases in Erbil in northern Iraq. Against U.S. assets and allied infrastructure from Saudi Arabia to Bahrain to Kuwait City. And Iran was not only hitting military targets. From the very first day of this war, Iran went after the economic infrastructure of the entire Gulf region in a way that had never been done before in any previous Middle East conflict. On the first day alone, Iran launched 137 missiles and 209 drones at the UAE, Dubai, Abu Dhabi, the financial capital of the Arab world, cities that are home to hundreds of thousands of American and Western citizens, cities that generate trillions of dollars in global trade and financial flows every year. The UAE's own defense ministry confirmed that of the ballistic missiles launched, 13 made it through and struck. 44 drones caused impact. The debris from intercepted missiles fell on populated areas of Dubai and Abu Dhabi, causing fires across the city and civilian infrastructure damage. At Abu Dhabi's International Airport, a person was killed. Dubai International Airport was hit. Kuwait International Airport was targeted. Fuel storage tanks and civilian aviation infrastructure across the Gulf became targets of a military campaign that was simultaneously fighting a war against the United States and Israel. And Iran launched its single biggest missile barrage of the entire war at Doha, Qatar, targeting the city that hosts Al Udeid Air Base directly. Journalists on the ground in Doha described a terrifying scene. Massive explosions rocking the city every few minutes, plumes of smoke rising above the high-rise towers of West Bay, the gleaming financial district built on Qatar's oil wealth. Shockwaves felt through buildings across the city miles from the point of impact. The barrage lasted over an hour and a half without stopping. Qatar's prime minister called it a flagrant violation of sovereignty. And here is the detail that tells you everything about the strategic ruthlessness of the Iranian approach in this war. While the missiles were actively falling on Doha, Iran's foreign minister called the Qatari government on the phone, and he told them that the missiles were directed at American military interests, not at Qatar itself. He was apologizing for a bombing while the bombing was happening. Iran struck the Burj Khalifa, the tallest building in the world, the architectural symbol of the Gulf's transformation into a global economic powerhouse over the last 2 decades. The building that appears in the promotional materials of every airline, every luxury brand, every financial institution that does business in the region. A missile struck it. This was not an error. This was a calculated message delivered to every government, every investor, every company, every country in the world that has economic interests in the Gulf. No target is sacred. No symbol is untouchable. Anywhere you have economic interests connected to American military presence is now inside our target envelope. Iran destroyed a $300 million American military radar system with a single precision strike. $300 million. One hit. Gone. They struck and decommissioned an American ammunition ship, attacking not just a military vessel, but the logistics supply chain that keeps American forces armed and operational. And American blood was being shed. On the second day of this war, U.S. Central Command confirmed that 3 American service members had been killed in action and 5 more had been seriously wounded. By the following day, that toll rose to 6 Americans killed in action and 18 seriously wounded. 6 American service members dead in the opening days of Operation Epic Fury. Names that had not yet been released to the public. Families that were being notified in the middle of the night. The first American combat deaths in a direct conflict with Iran in the entire history of the 2 countries' adversarial relationship. Iran's own state-aligned sources made a different claim entirely. Iranian sources claimed that 220 American personnel had been killed or injured in their strikes, marking what they described as a major escalation and a significant blow to American military capacity in the region. The U.S. government has not confirmed those numbers. The discrepancy between 6 confirmed American deaths and Iran's claimed 220 illustrates something important that we need to understand about this war. Both sides are engaged in information warfare simultaneously with military warfare. The truth, as it almost always is in active combat, sits somewhere between the competing claims. What is confirmed by CENTCOM is 6 American deaths. What Iran claims is much higher. And the families of American service members deployed in the region know that the actual casualty picture may not be fully visible for weeks or months. Trump vowed publicly to avenge the deaths of American service members and said combat operations would continue. He said Iran was being demolished. He demanded unconditional surrender. and he warned that there would likely be more American deaths as the campaign continued. That last part, "there will likely be more," was perhaps the most honest thing said publicly by any American official in the first days of this war. Because more followed. Now let's talk about the nuclear dimension, because this is where the story changes from a devastating but potentially containable regional war into something with consequences that stretch far beyond any battlefield in the Middle East. The United States and Israel struck 4 of Iran's nuclear facilities during this war. Natanz, Iran's primary uranium enrichment site, the place where Iran had been producing highly enriched uranium that by late 2025 had brought it within weeks of what nuclear analysts call breakout capacity. That is the technical term for Iran has enough material to build a nuclear weapon if it chooses to assemble one. The IAEA, the International Atomic Energy Agency, the United Nations nuclear watchdog, confirmed that buildings at Natanz had been damaged. The facility's centrifuge halls, where thousands of centrifuges had been spinning enriched uranium toward weapons-grade material, were among the buildings struck. Isfahan, Iran's uranium conversion facility and fuel production complex, where uranium is chemically processed before enrichment, also struck. Independent analysts described what they termed massive destruction at Isfahan. The Minzadeh compound, northeast of Tehran, a covert, deeply underground facility that Israeli intelligence had determined was being used to relocate the most sensitive nuclear weapons research operations after earlier strikes in June 2025 had compromised other sites. According to the IDF, Iranian nuclear scientists were actively working at this facility on what Israeli intelligence described as a key component for nuclear weapons at the time of the strike. The IDF confirmed its destruction. And Levizan II, also known as the Mojda complex. This is the facility that houses the administrative operations of SPND, Iran's Organization of Defensive Innovation and Research. That is a deliberately bureaucratic and opaque name for the organization that runs Iran's nuclear weapons research program. The administrative heart of Iran's nuclear weapons development work also struck 4 nuclear facilities in a war that began with the explicit stated goal of permanently ending Iran's nuclear weapons program. Now here is where I need you to pay very close attention, because the question that matters most is not whether these facilities were destroyed. The satellite imagery confirms significant damage. The IAEA confirmed damage at Natanz. The IDF confirmed damage at multiple sites. The question that matters most is, what happened to what was inside those facilities? Nuclear material does not evaporate when a building is bombed. Enriched uranium, the material that Iran had been accumulating for years toward weapons-grade purity, does not disappear in an explosion. It goes somewhere. It scatters. It can be recovered and moved by people who were in those facilities before or after the strikes. And with no IAEA inspectors able to access these sites during an active war, with inspectors unable to physically walk into buildings inside Iranian territory while American and Israeli bombs are still falling, there is a confirmed gap in global nuclear accountability right now that exists for the first time since the end of World War II. Iran's own state-aligned sources made a different claim entirely. Iranian sources claimed that 220 American personnel had been killed or injured in their strikes, marking what they described as a major escalation and a significant blow to American military capacity in the region. The U.S. government has not confirmed those numbers. The The discrepancy between 6 confirmed American deaths and Iran's claimed 220 illustrates something important that we need to understand about this war. Both sides are engaged in information warfare simultaneously with military warfare. The truth, as it almost always is in active combat, sits somewhere between the competing claims. What is confirmed by CENTCOM is 6 American deaths. What Iran claims is much higher. And the families of American service members deployed in the region know that the actual casualty picture may not be fully visible for weeks or months. Trump vowed publicly to avenge the deaths of American service members and said combat operations would continue. He said Iran was being demolished. He demanded unconditional surrender. And he warned that there would likely be more American deaths as the campaign continued. That last part, there will likely be more, was perhaps the most honest thing said publicly by any American official in the first days of this war. Because more followed. Now let's talk about the nuclear dimension. Because this is where the story changes from a devastating but potentially containable regional war into something with consequences that stretch far beyond any battlefield in the Middle East. The United States and Israel struck 4 of Iran's nuclear facilities during this war. Natanz, Iran's primary uranium enrichment site, the place where Iran had been producing highly enriched uranium that by late 2025 had brought it within weeks of what nuclear analysts call breakout capacity. That is the technical term for Iran has enough material to build a nuclear weapon if it chooses to assemble one. The IAEA, the International Atomic Energy Agency, the United Nations nuclear watchdog, confirmed that buildings at Natanz had been damaged. The facility's centrifuge halls, where thousands of centrifuges had been spinning enriched uranium toward weapons-grade material, were among the buildings struck. Isfahan, Iran's uranium conversion facility and fuel production complex, where uranium is chemically processed before enrichment, also struck. Independent analysts describe what they termed massive destruction at Isfahan. The Minzadeh compound, northeast of Tehran, a covert, deeply underground facility that Israeli intelligence had determined was being used to relocate the most sensitive nuclear weapons research operations after earlier strikes in June 2025 had compromised other sites. According to the IDF, Iranian nuclear scientists were actively working at this facility on what Israeli intelligence described as a key component for nuclear weapons at the time of the strike. The IDF confirmed its destruction. And Lavizan 2, also known as the Mojdeh complex. This is the facility that houses the administrative operations of SPND, Iran's Organization of Defensive Innovation and Research. That is a deliberately bureaucratic and opaque name for the organization that runs Iran's nuclear weapons research program. The administrative heart of Iran's nuclear weapons development work also struck 4 nuclear facilities. In a war that began with the explicit stated goal of permanently ending Iran's nuclear weapons program. Now here is where I need you to pay very close attention. Because the question that matters most is not whether these facilities were destroyed. The satellite imagery confirms significant damage. The IAEA confirmed damage at Natanz. The IDF confirmed damage at multiple sites. The question that matters most is, what happened to what was inside those facilities? Nuclear material does not evaporate when a building is bombed. Enriched uranium, the material that Iran had been accumulating for years toward weapons-grade purity, does not disappear in an explosion. It goes somewhere. It scatters. It can be recovered and moved by people who were in those facilities before or after the strikes. And with no IAEA inspectors able to access these sites during an active war, with inspectors unable to physically walk into buildings inside Iranian territory while American and Israeli bombs are still falling, there is a confirmed gap in global nuclear accountability right now that exists for the first time since the end of World War II. The Center for Strategic and International Studies, one of Washington's most respected defense think tanks, specifically flagged nuclear material proliferation as a direct and immediate risk arising from striking these facilities during active combat operations. Not a secondary concern, not a theoretical future problem, an immediate risk. Where is Iran's enriched uranium stockpile right now? Nobody outside of classified intelligence briefings can answer that question with certainty. And the significance of that uncertainty is almost impossible to overstate. There is also an unconfirmed but widely reported additional dimension to the nuclear story that has not received enough attention. Reports emerging from multiple intelligence sources indicate that Mossad, Israeli intelligence, and Israeli special forces may have physically entered Iranian territory during this war and operated at nuclear facilities. If confirmed, this would mean that Israeli special forces were on the ground inside Iran's most sensitive nuclear sites, potentially removing materials, destroying equipment, or gathering intelligence that goes beyond what can be accomplished from the air. The Israeli government has not confirmed this. The Iranian government has not confirmed this. But the reporting of it from multiple independent intelligence tracking organizations is significant, and it adds another dimension to the nuclear picture that the public does not yet have full visibility into. Now let's talk about the specific line that Iran just crossed, the one that changes everything. Iran's threat to strike Dimona did not come from a social media post. It did not come from a junior official making inflammatory remarks. It came from a senior Iranian military official. It was reported by ISNA, the Iranian Students' News Agency, which is Iran's semi-official state news agency. It was then picked up and confirmed by Reuters and multiple other international news organizations. This is an official, on-record, state-sanctioned threat from the Iranian government. The exact quote, reported by ISNA and confirmed by Reuters, is this: "If Washington and Tel Aviv pursue a regime change scenario in practice, Tehran's final effective missiles will target the Dimona nuclear reactor and all regional energy infrastructure." This is a scenario we have already prepared for. Let me tell you what Dimona is. Because most Americans have a vague sense that it's important without understanding exactly why this threat is so specifically catastrophic. The Negev Nuclear Research Center near Dimona in southern Israel is, by the universal consensus of every intelligence agency, every nuclear watchdog, every independent analyst who has studied it, the heart of Israel's nuclear weapons program. Israel maintains what is called a policy of nuclear ambiguity, officially neither confirming nor denying the existence of nuclear weapons. But the existence of Israel's nuclear arsenal is one of the worst-kept secrets in the world. The CIA, the British intelligence services, the IAEA, the Russian government, every Arab state government in the region, all of them know Israel has nuclear weapons. The estimate from most credible sources is that Israel possesses between 80 and 400 nuclear warheads, making it the most nuclear-armed state in the entire Middle East by a factor that is not even close. Dimona has been Israel's primary nuclear facility since the 1960s. It is the site where Israel's plutonium production reactor operates. It is the site where Israel's nuclear weapons research and development has been centered for 60 years. It is one of the most heavily defended pieces of real estate on the planet. Israel has surrounded it with air defense batteries, has dedicated fighter jets tasked specifically with intercepting anything that approaches its airspace, and has never publicly acknowledged any details of what happens inside the facility. Kuwait is burning tonight. A high-rise building in Kuwait City. The building belonging to Kuwait's public institution for social security was set ablaze by Iranian drone strikes on day 9 of this war. Sirens sounded across the city. Kuwait's Air Force scrambled. Fuel tanks at Kuwait International Airport were hit. This happened the same morning that Iran's president had apologized for attacking Gulf states. Kuwait is not Iran's enemy. Kuwait is a small Gulf emirate of about 4 million people that has tried to stay out of this conflict. Kuwait hosts American military assets, the Ali al-Salem air base that has been hit repeatedly. And Iran's position has consistently been that any country that allows its territory to be used for American or Israeli operations against Iran is a legitimate target. Kuwait's protest that it is a neutral country hosting an American base under long-standing bilateral agreements is, from Iran's IRGC command perspective, legally and strategically irrelevant. You are hosting the enemy. Your infrastructure is the enemy's infrastructure. Saudi Arabia has been hit. Riyadh, the capital of the world's largest oil exporter, has faced Iranian missiles. Saudi Arabia has intercepted them. Saudi Arabia's missile defense systems have been performing relatively well, but the fact that missiles are being aimed at Riyadh in the first place represents an escalation in the Iran-Saudi confrontation that decades of proxy warfare never quite reached. A direct Iranian missile strike on Saudi infrastructure would hit the global oil market with a force that no central bank or emergency petroleum reserve could fully absorb. Bahrain, which hosts the U.S. Navy's 5th Fleet, the American naval force responsible for the entire Persian Gulf, Red Sea, Arabian Sea, and parts of the Indian Ocean, has been targeted repeatedly. The 5th Fleet is the naval force whose ships have been launching Tomahawk cruise missiles at Iranian targets from the opening hours of this war. Iran hitting the 5th Fleet's home port is not an abstract military move. It is Iran reaching into the physical infrastructure from which it is being bombed. The Strait of Hormuz. I need to spend a moment on this because its importance cannot be overstated, and it has not received the coverage it deserves in most Western media. The Strait of Hormuz is a narrow waterway, at its narrowest point, about 21 miles wide, between Iran and Oman at the mouth of the Persian Gulf. Through this strait passes approximately 20% of the world's oil supply every single day. Not 20% of Middle Eastern oil, 20% of global oil. 1 in every 5 barrels of oil consumed anywhere on Earth passes through that 21-mile choke point. Japan, South Korea, India, China, all of these economies depend on oil and liquefied natural gas that transits the Strait of Hormuz. Cargo movement through the strait has already been disrupted since the war began. Day 8 reporting noted that cargo movement was resuming near the strait, but the threat to it has not been eliminated. Iran controls the northern shore of the Strait of Hormuz. Iran has, in previous confrontations with Western navies, demonstrated the ability to mine the strait, to deploy fast attack boats in swarm tactics against larger naval vessels, and to threaten shipping with anti-ship missiles from its shore-based positions. If Iran makes the decision to close or severely disrupt the Strait of Hormuz, the economic consequences are global immediate, and not solvable by military action without an extended and costly naval campaign. Oil prices are already up significantly since this war began. The India government, which imports a large percentage of its oil through Gulf shipping lanes, invoked emergency powers within the first week of the war to direct its refiners to maximize LPG production to prevent a domestic fuel shortage. When India is invoking emergency energy powers, you understand the economic radius of what is happening in the Persian Gulf. Now let's talk about Russia and China, because these two countries are the hidden architecture of this war. They are the reason Iran has the weapons it has. They are the reason this war has consequences that extend beyond the Middle East. And they are approaching a decision point of their own that could change the entire global security architecture. Russia's relationship with Iran goes deeper than weapons sales. Russia supplied Iran with S-400 air defense systems, among the most advanced surface-to-air missile systems in the world. Russia supplied Iran with Su-35 fighter jets. Russia has provided Iran with the kind of military technology that no Western nation would have transferred to Tehran under any diplomatic framework. But Russia's deepest material interest in what's happening is economic. Russia and Iran are the co-anchors of the international North-South transport corridor, a trade route that runs from Russia through Iran down to India and the Persian Gulf. This corridor was specifically engineered to create a trade route that bypasses the Western-controlled maritime shipping lanes that currently dominate global trade. It was Russia and Iran's answer to the fact that Western nations can, in theory, disrupt Russian and Iranian trade by controlling the major choke points of global commerce. The INSTC was supposed to give both countries a route that was immune to Western pressure. The United States and Israel just struck Bandar Abbas, Iran's most strategically vital port and the southern gateway of that entire corridor, along with other Iranian port infrastructure. Russia is watching its primary alternative to Western-controlled trade routes get bombed into rubble. This is not just geopolitical inconvenience for Russia. This is an attack on the economic architecture that Russia has been building for years as its answer to Western sanctions. Putin has not made a direct military move. The official Russian position has been condemnation of the strikes through diplomatic channels. But there is a significant gap between Russia's official statements and Russia's actions. A gap that the analysts at Special Eurasia, a firm that specifically studies Russian and Chinese strategic engagement in the Middle East, described as follows. Moscow and Beijing have already transitioned from being diplomatic allies of Iran to being its technological anchors. They are in this war through the weapons and technology they have already provided. They have not declared it, but they are in it. China's stake in this conflict is even more immediately economic. China is the world's largest oil importer. The Belt and Road Initiative, China's trillion-dollar global infrastructure project, the centerpiece of Xi Jinping's entire foreign policy vision, depends on Iranian territory as a critical land bridge connecting Central Asia to the Gulf. Chinese infrastructure investment inside Iran is significant. Chinese trade routes running through Iran are significant, and American bombs are falling on all of it. But China's most urgent concern is energy. A significant portion of the oil that powers the second largest economy in the world transits the Strait of Hormuz. If that strait closes, even partially, even temporarily, China's industrial base takes a direct hit. Oil prices spike globally. The manufacturing chains that China depends on for its export economy get stressed. And China has no good military option to reopen the Strait of Hormuz unilaterally, because doing so would require a direct confrontation with the U.S. Navy that China is not yet prepared to win. Beijing is watching this war with the particular anxiety of a country that has very high economic stakes, limited ability to influence the immediate military situation, and a strategic calculation about whether this represents the best opportunity it has ever had for a different geopolitical move entirely. The U.S. Naval Institute published a scenario paper before this war began that described a strategic logic that is now being actively discussed in every major defense ministry around the world. The scenario runs as follows. China and Russia, in coordination with Iran, could have encouraged Iran's escalatory posture in this conflict, specifically because a full-scale U.S. military campaign in the Middle East is the single best thing that could happen for China's Taiwan ambitions. Every American interceptor missile fired at an Iranian drone is a missile that is not available for Taiwan's defense. Every American aircraft carrier positioned in the Persian Gulf is an aircraft carrier that is not positioned in the Pacific. Every American ammunition stockpile being drawn down to support Operation Epic Fury is a stockpile that is not available for an extended Pacific campaign. And America's defense industrial capacity, even with Trump's announced plan to quadruple weapons production, cannot immediately replace what is being consumed. The People's Liberation Army has been conducting its most intensive exercises around Taiwan in the last 4 years. Chinese military assets in the South China Sea have been repositioned. Chinese naval movements have increased significantly. None of this is publicly being attributed to the Iran war, but the timing is not coincidental. And the strategic logic, America is consumed in the Middle East right now, the window for Taiwan may never be more favorable, is being discussed openly in the world's defense policy community. Trump announced that U.S. defense manufacturers will quadruple weapons production. This is not a peacetime announcement. Peacetime economies do not need to quadruple weapons production. This is a wartime industrial mobilization signal, the kind of signal that in previous generations preceded the full transformation of a country's industrial base onto a war footing. The fact that this announcement was made in the first week of this conflict tells you that the people running the American military effort understand that this is not a short war. Now let's talk about what happens next. Because there are 5 specific scenarios, not hypotheticals, not thought experiments, but actively modeled strategic possibilities that the people responsible for preventing catastrophe are working through right now. Scenario 1. Iran's IRGC commanders execute the Dimona strike. They have stated the trigger condition publicly if Washington and Tel Aviv pursue regime change. Trump has publicly demanded unconditional surrender. CENTCOM has confirmed that U.S. and Israeli forces have air dominance over Iran. The combination of unconditional surrender demands and air dominance over Iranian territory is, from the IRGC's perspective, a regime change operation. The trigger condition that Iran publicly stated has arguably already been met. The question is whether the IRGC commanders believe they have a missile capable of getting through Israel's air defenses and reaching Dimona. And the answer, given that they have Chinese Beidou 3 precision guidance, given that they demonstrated the ability to hit a $300 million American radar with a single strike, given that they have been firing in wave after wave in a pattern specifically designed to exhaust interceptor stocks, is that they may be closer to believing that than any public analysis has acknowledged. If a missile reaches Dimona, we have already walked through the radiological consequences. The Israeli response to a strike on its nuclear facility is the decision that cascades this into something without a precedent since 1945. Israel's government faces a domestic political reality in which any Israeli prime minister who does not respond with overwhelming force to a strike on Dimona has no political future. The nature of that overwhelming force, whether conventional or nuclear, is the decision that the entire world is now waiting on with the kind of dread that has not existed in the international system for 80 years. Scenario 2. Iran activates its full proxy network simultaneously. This is the scenario that military planners call the Ring of Fire. Iran's strategic concept of encircling Israel and American assets in the region with armed proxy groups that can activate in coordination. Hezbollah in Lebanon is, even after the losses it suffered in 2024, still one of the most heavily armed non-state actors in the world. It has hundreds of thousands of rockets and missiles aimed at northern Israel. Shia militias in Iraq have already been conducting drone attacks on U.S. bases throughout this war. In Diyala, Anbar, Muthana, and Nineveh provinces. Houthi forces in Yemen, who demonstrated in 2024 that they can hit commercial shipping lanes and Israeli territory from the southern peninsula, are positioned to reopen the Red Sea front that was partially suppressed in earlier American operations. If all three of these forces activate simultaneously in a coordinated campaign, not the current lower intensity strikes, but a full military surge, the United States faces simultaneous combat operations in Iran, Iraq, Lebanon, Yemen, and potentially other theaters at once. The American military is large and capable, but the combination of simultaneous multi-front combat, the ammunition stockpile concerns that are already driving the quadruple production announcement, and the risk of significant American casualty events creates a political pressure inside the United States that historically has the power to change the direction of American foreign policy regardless of what any president wants. The American people's tolerance for American casualties in a war that was not preceded by an extensive public debate that began in the early hours of a Saturday morning and that involves countries most Americans cannot locate precisely on a map is an unknown variable in this conflict that nobody has an honest answer to. 6 Americans killed in the opening days, Iran claiming 220. Trump saying there will likely be more. The families watching their sons and daughters deployed in the Gulf are watching all of this with a personal stake that no policy briefing can fully account for. The war grinds into a strategic stalemate. The U.S. and Israel have air dominance, but cannot produce Iran's capitulation from the air alone. ACLED, the Armed Conflict Location and Event Data Project, which tracks political violence and conflict globally, published an analysis concluding that full capitulation by Iran, encompassing the abandonment of its nuclear and missile programs and its anti-American and anti-Israeli posture, remains unlikely even after the killing of Khamenei. The IRGC is deeply institutionalized. Its ideology runs through its command structure in a way that does not depend on any single leader. Destroying the physical infrastructure does not destroy the institutional memory and commitment of an organization that has been preparing for this exact scenario for decades. If the air campaign cannot produce surrender, and if the American government is not prepared for a ground invasion of a country of 87 million people with a military culture that has been telling its soldiers for 40 years that the Americans and the Israelis are coming, then the war reaches a point where neither side can win and neither side can stop. That is not peace. That is a forever war consuming American military resources, American taxpayer money, American diplomatic credibility, and American lives at a tempo that the United States has shown historically it cannot sustain indefinitely against determined adversaries. Scenario 4. A direct confrontation between American and Russian military assets. Russia has been quiet officially, but Russian military hardware is being destroyed in Iran. the S-400 systems that Russia delivered, the Su-35 aircraft, the entire air defense architecture that Russia helped Iran build. There is a line in Russian military doctrine, never publicly stated but widely understood by people who study Russian strategic thinking, about the point at which the destruction of Russian military technology in another country's hands becomes a direct challenge to Russian deterrence credibility globally. Russia sold Iran its most advanced air defense systems with the implicit understanding that those systems could defend against American airstrikes. Those systems have been destroyed. Russia's deterrence credibility, its ability to sell security to other countries, takes a hit every time an S-400 system is bombed into rubble in Iranian territory. Scenario 5. The Chinese-Taiwan window opens. American military resources are consumed in the Middle East. American interceptor missiles are being depleted. American ammunition stocks are stressed. American carrier groups are positioned in the Persian Gulf, not the Pacific. And China's leadership, watching all of this with the calculation of a government that has been planning its Taiwan operation for decades, makes the assessment that this window, this specific combination of American strategic distraction and military resource consumption, is the best window that will exist in the foreseeable future. A Chinese military move on Taiwan while America is fighting a major war in the Middle East would create the most significant test of American power and American commitment that has existed since the end of the Cold War. The United States cannot simultaneously sustain a major Middle East war, defend Taiwan, and maintain credible deterrence in Europe against Russia. Not with its current force structure, not with its current ammunition stockpiles, not in the near term before the quadruple production announcement can actually produce results. The choice between commitments in that scenario is a choice that the current American political system may not be capable of making coherently under the pressures of simultaneous crises. And here is the final piece. The piece that brings all of this back to where we started tonight, in Kuwait City, watching a high-rise building burn because an Iranian drone hit it 6 hours after Iran's president apologized for attacking Kuwait. The internal split within Iran between the elected government that wants to limit the war and the IRGC that wants to escalate it is not just a political conflict. It is the central strategic uncertainty of this entire conflict. The United States is conducting this war on the assumption that sufficient military pressure will produce a political decision by Iran's leadership to stop fighting. The entire logic of Operation Epic Fury, the 900 targets in 12 hours, the air dominance, the demands for unconditional surrender, is built on the assumption that Iran's leadership is a unified actor capable of making a single, coherent decision to stop. But Iran's leadership is not a unified actor. The IRGC hardliners who are making the military decisions do not share the calculation of Iran's elected president about what this war requires. They have a different threat assessment. They believe, and they may be right, that unconditional surrender to the United States and Israel means the end of everything they have built. The end of the revolutionary ideology they have devoted their lives to. The end of the Islamic Republic as they understand it. And men who believe they are fighting for their existence, men who have been preparing for exactly this scenario for 4 decades, do not respond to military pressure the way a rational state actor responding to cost-benefit calculations is supposed to respond. This is the line Iran just crossed. Not just the Dimona threat, as serious as that is. The line is the demonstration, in the gap between what Iran's president said and what Iran's IRGC did, that the person who needs to make the decision to stop this war may not be the same person who controls the missiles. And the people who control the missiles have publicly, on record, officially, through Iran's own state media, told the world what they are prepared to do if they believe regime change is the actual goal. The evidence that regime change is the actual goal is everywhere. The United States has air dominance over Iran. Trump is demanding unconditional surrender. CENTCOM says it is striking over 3,000 targets. The nuclear facilities are gone. The Navy is on the bottom of the ocean. The Air Force has been wiped out. The Supreme Leader is dead. If that is not a regime change operation, then the words regime change have lost their meaning. And the IRGC knows it. And the IRGC has already prepared for it. Their words, not mine. What happens now is not a single decision made in a single capital. What happens now is the collision of 5 different governments' calculations. The United States, Israel, Iran, Russia, and China, each of which believes it is acting rationally, each of which has red lines, and some of which have red lines that are closer to each other than anyone has publicly admitted. What happens now is the next 72 hours, and the 72 after that, in a conflict that has already produced 6 dead Americans, already produced a nuclear threat against Israel's nuclear facility, already set Gulf cities on fire, already disrupted global energy markets, and already demonstrated that the conventional military playbook, destroy enough of their stuff and they'll surrender, does not work against an adversary whose hardline commanders have been waiting for this moment their entire military careers. Nobody who started the first 2 world wars thought they were starting a world war. They thought they were winning a regional conflict. Every major escalation in the history of the last century looked, from inside the moment, like a manageable situation where the other side would back down once they understood the costs. And in almost every case, the other side did not back down. They had their own red lines. They had their own leaders who could not back down without losing power. They had their own public constituencies who had been told for years that retreat was betrayal. And the miscalculations of each side, compounding on each other, produced outcomes that none of the original decision makers planned, wanted, or believed were possible when they made the first move. We are living inside a moment like that right now. And whether it produces the outcome that no one wants depends on decisions being made in the next 72 hours by people operating under more pressure, with less sleep, with more incomplete information, and with higher personal stakes than any of us watching from the outside can fully imagine. The question is not whether Iran will stop. The question is which Iran. The president who apologizes after the bombing, or the IRGC commanders who order the next wave, is going to make the decision that determines whether this stays a devastating but containable regional war or becomes the thing that historians are still writing about 100 years from now. Iran just crossed a line nobody expected. And what happens now is the most important question in the world. If this gave you something that the headlines didn't, if you understand this moment differently now than you did at the beginning of this video, subscribe to Red Zone Intel. Hit the bell. Because the next development in this war is not going to wait for a convenient moment to break. And when it does, you need to understand what it actually means.